Based on conversations with Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir of Pakistan, and wherein they requested that I hold off the destructive force being sent tonight to Iran and subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire. The reason for doing so is that we have already met and exceeded military objectives and are very far along with a definitive agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East. We received a 10-point proposal from Iran and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate.
What you just heard is the whole story in one sentence. Not the chest thumping, not the spin, that line, a workable basis on which to negotiate. Because hours before that, Trump was threatening catastrophic escalation. Then suddenly, right before his own deadline, he's talking about a ceasefire and treating Iran's framework like a real starting point. Now here's the question that matters. Did Trump actually accept Iran's terms, or did he hand Tehran a propaganda victory by blinking first and letting them define the Storathats where we need to slow down and separate three things very clearly? What this source video says, what Trump publicly said, and what verified. Reporting actually confirms. And once you do that, the picture is still politically brutal for Trump, just not for every reason people are shouting online. Stay with me because the facts here are sharper than the hype.
Points. And that's exactly what Donald Trump did here. Let me just go through the 10 points for you that Iran has been saying for weeks now. Number one, a commitment to non-aggression against Iran, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and the Iranian Shiite groups in Iraq, continuation of Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz, acceptance of Iran's uranium enrichment, lifting all primary sanctions from Iran, lifting all secondary sanctions of Iran, termination of all UN Security Council resolutions, termination of all Board of Governor resolutions, payment of compensation to Iran, withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from the region, cessation of war on all fronts, including against Hezbollah in Lebanon. That's always.
Here's the cleanest way to understand this. The source video is right about one big thing. Trump publicly shifted from maximum threat to active negotiation. That is real. Reuters, AP, NPR, and PBS all reported that Trump announced a 2-week ceasefire and described Iran's 10-point proposal as a workable basis for talks. But here's the contrast that matters. A workable basis for negotiation is not the same thing as a signed surrender document. That distinction is everything. Verified reporting does show that Iran's public framework included huge asks, sanctions relief, continued enrichment, regional pullback, and control over passage through Hormuz. But major outlets also reported that the details were still disputed, still being negotiated, and in some cases not independently verified. NPR explicitly said it was still working to verify whether the version published by Iranian state media matched what was actually sent to Washington, and AP reported something else viewers absolutely need to hear. Even after the ceasefire announcement, Israeli officials said the U.S. was still committed to pushing for removal of Iran's nuclear material, stopping enrichment, and eliminating the ballistic missile threat in the talks ahead. So yes, Trump climbed down. Yes, Iran instantly claimed victory. Yes, that is politically humiliating after all the apocalyptic threats, but the source video skips the most important reality. Public posture and final terms are not the same thing. The consequence is still serious. Trump created a crisis, threatened civilian infrastructure, then backed into a negotiation window that led
said he's pulling back on his threats to widen attacks on Iran, subject to Iran agreeing to a 2-week ceasefire and reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran soon after accepted the ceasefire, but emphasized that, quote, this does not signify the termination of the war. Trump's latest threat over the Iran war hit a new extreme Tuesday when he warned,
this is why source-based commentary matters. The emotional read is obvious. Trump looked strong 1 minute and boxed in the next. But the deeper story is how fast the language changed. Public threats about wiping out infrastructure gave way to a ceasefire and a negotiation framework. That's not just a tactical shift. That is the moment. The political narrative flipped because once you move from ultimatum to bargaining, the side that held firm gets to claim it forced the turn.
From Iran's Supreme National Security Council, calling this a crushing defeat for the U.S., saying that they've been forced to accept their 10-point plan. Iran claims U.S. has agreed to continued Iranian control of the Strait of Hormuz, continued enrichment of uranium, war reparations, full reparations, and U.S. leaves its military bases in the region. Statement of the Supreme National Security Council of Iran on the 2-week ceasefire and negotiations. The enemy, in its unfair, illegal, and criminal war against the Iranian nation, has suffered an undeniable, historic, and crushing defeat.
Let me be blunt. This is the part that should alarm Americans, even if you support a ceasefire. Iran got to stand up in public and say the United States blinked. Now, that is Iran talking. That is not neutral fact. But when your own president spends days making absolute threats and then scrambles into a 2-week pause before his own deadline, you hand your adversary the perfect script. And that is the larger pattern here. Trump governs like a man who thinks intimidation is strategy. He turns every crisis into a loyalty test, a branding exercise, a spectacle. But foreign policy is not cable television. When you make maximal threats you can't or won't fully carry out, you don't look tough. You look erratic, and erratic leadership is dangerous. It's dangerous for troops. It's dangerous for allies. It's dangerous for civilians. And it is dangerous for democratic accountability because the public gets swept from panic to spin before anyone has time to ask the basic question. Who authorized this? What were the goals? And what exactly did the United States just commit? Toven legal experts and Democrats were already warning that Trump's threats against civilian infrastructure crossed into possible war crime territory. So when the White House pivots from that kind of rhetoric into a murky negotiation window, people do not owe him gratitude for stepping back from a fire he helped build. My view is simple. A ceasefire is better than more killing. But a president should not get credit for dragging the country to the edge and then acting like the last-minute exit ramp was master strategy. And if you want to know why this still feels unstable, look at the next evidence block. And here's why the source video should be sharpened, not softened. Even inside the public reporting, the details were still all over the place. Iran's side talked like the deal already validated its control and demands. Rubio had previously called any permanent tolling of Hormuz illegal and unacceptable, AP reported Israeli officials. We're told the U.S. still wants enrichment stopped and missile threats eliminated. That means the public message was not a neat finished agreement. It was a foggy, high-stakes scramble, and in politics, when the facts are still fluid, the first side to declare victory often wins the emotional round.
Nation. So we're going to be keeping a close eye on this. But as we said on the Midas Touch Network, Iran is declaring victory after Trump agreed to a ceasefire, saying the U.S. adopted Iranian terms, and it's hard to see it any other way. Iran's leadership openly celebrating what it called a crushing defeat for the United States after Trump agreed to a 2-week ceasefire and acknowledged using Iran's own 10-point framework as the basis of negotiation. I mean, do you remember when Barack Ravid, Donald Trump's main news outlet over at Axios, said, remember, a U.S. official.
So what did we actually learn here? We learned that Trump threatened extraordinary destruction, then backed into a ceasefire and negotiation track just before his own deadline. We learned Iran immediately used that reversal to claim political victory. And we learned the public details were still disputed enough that nobody honest should pretend the final deal was fully settled in that moment. But here is the biggest takeaway. A democracy cannot afford foreign policy by tantrum. Americans deserve better than war threats in the morning, victory posts at night, and a haze of contradictions in between. We deserve leaders who do not treat military escalation like a branding exercise. We deserve media coverage that can tell the difference between what a clip says, what a government claims, and what the evidence actually proves. And we deserve Congress and the press to ask harder questions before a president gets anywhere near this kind of brinkmanship again. Because once a country gets used to chaos as leadership, accountability starts to disappear. And when accountability disappears, truth goes with it. So yes, if this ceasefire holds, that is better than more death. Absolutely. But peace built on confusion, intimidation, and spin is fragile. And the public has every right to ask who got us here, who blinked, and what the United States may be giving up behind closed doors. That is why this story matters, not just for the Middle East, for us, for the kind of country we still want to be. If you want political coverage that doesn't insult your intelligence and doesn't hide the receipts, subscribe. Final sentence: strongmen love spectacle. Democracies survive on truth. If you want the facts, the context, and the part they hope you miss, hit subscribe and stay with us.